carry on to next year in order to make it a great year. And then once we get Dean on here, I'm going to start with Amy.
I don't know if you heard Tim ask me that very same question like 3 minutes ago.
Well, there's more people on now. There's more people on now. We've now passed the 300 mark, so this is good.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations.
There you go.
Look, I mean, everybody is aware of what's been happening this year. Our amygdalas are on fire. Our animal brains are like, just so many considerations. And, I think it's important just to find a way to relax, to meditate, to get inside yourself and away from external things that are invalidating, disempowering, and those could be, just your own thoughts, to just stay positive and to impact what you can impact the part of the world where you can make a difference. I mean, it sounds like a Hallmark card or like a personal development mantra, but take care of the people you can take care of, your friends, your family, your teams, and your virtual communities, and do your best at that. And, the Genius Network community in total, if we all focus on something like that, the impact in the world will be huge. But maximize your self-care, don't subscribe to disempowering thoughts, and keep moving forward.
Well, that's very good. Thank you, Michael. Really, really, really appreciate it. So, okay, so here's what we're going to do today. Dean Jackson, you're finally on, right?
I'm on. Here we are. I don't see me, though.
How is it? Can you publicly tell everyone, how is it that you happen to never have the link for these meetings right before we're supposed to do it?
Usually I do. Somebody sends them to me, but I don't know whether I get, maybe you don't want me to come. Is that what it is? You're trying to keep me out of these things. That's what it is.
No, I went to a Dale Carnegie course 25 years ago, maybe longer, when I first started getting into all this stuff. And one of the, it was like a 12-week course, and it was based on the chapters of how to win friends and influence people. And there was one part where it's never criticize, condemn, and complain. And I like to criticize, condemn, and complain. It just seems to be such an enjoyable thing. And if I could blame Dean for things while we're doing it in a fun way, in a fun, loving way, but I'm gonna have Amy break down the psychological sort of attachment disorder, whatever it is I have that causes me to relate that way. And so, anyway.
We'll get some communication advice for our relationship. It'll be
look. I mean, if everyone wants to know the truth about podcasts and doing interviews, this is just a way for me to do my own therapy. I mean, it really is. And it is, we all kind of record our research as we're learning things whenever you're doing live stuff. So remember that, record your research. When you're trying to figure stuff out, record it, interview people, package it, learn from it, learn the lessons. There's so much that has been helpful to me to accelerate whatever sort of, business success and life success I've had simply by talking to other people. And so, today, I'll set this up. This is going to be the last Zoom live that I do before I go on a one-year sabbatical that starts February, that starts January 1st, 2021. And I'm going to be gone for a year. And I'm still figuring out how we're going to do social media. I think I might just either go completely dark, or I will let my team run it and kind of take over, let my Genius Network members maybe run it and take over. But this is it. This is it. And I'm taking a one-year sabbatical. I've gotten so many supportive letters and posts and things like that. So I appreciate that. Many of you that are here have sent me cards and letters and nice things. So thank you. And if you want to see why I'm doing this, and if it maybe inspires you to take your own version of a sabbatical, you can go to joesabbatical.com. There's a letter there. That's the first draft. I'm going to be putting up a 2-hour interview that I did with the writer Ben Hardy. That'll be up in the next day or two, where he really just interviewed me. And he's going to put that, he's going to write a whole article about it, either in Psychology Today or Inc. or Fast Company. He writes for different magazines, but it'll be in there, and that'll give you some updates. And, a lot of people have said, because you've said you're going to do this, it's going to be powerful. So I'm going to get to the guest that me and Dean are going to have a conversation with. I'll ask her some questions, and then we'll do a little bit of Q&A with you guys. We probably won't be able to get to everyone here. Right now, there's approximately 361 people, and I'm sure it'll go up and down throughout the next few minutes. We're going to put this up as a podcast episode. And so let me give you a little bit of, let me introduce her first, and then I'll throw in some thoughts.
While you're doing that, Joe, I'm going to restart real quick so I can see if I can get my camera to, I don't see myself here. So
yeah, I don't see you either. I see like
right.
what looks like, okay.
I'll be right back.
You do that, Dean.
Okay.
All right, so here's how I recently got introduced to Amy Chan, and this has all happened within the last few weeks. So my dear friend Neil Strauss, who I've known for a long time, we've done interviews with him on the podcast. He's an amazing writer. He's written many New York Times bestselling books, and one of the first ones was The Game, and then 10 years later, he wrote The Truth after he went through all the wreckage of these crazy relationships in the pickup world and stuff. And I remember me and Neil, I took him down to see a talk at the Sexual Recovery Institute in Los Angeles to hear her talk about sex addiction and stuff, because he was doing a whole deep dive into relationships. And I'm very public about, what had happened to me. I was, a lot of sexual abuse as a kid, and that made it really hard for me to know how to do relationships. My mother died when I was 4 years old, so my father never remarried. I never had any sort of positive female influence in my early childhood, and I was a scared, shy, introverted kid. I became a drug addict, had a lot of addictive behaviors. A lot of the relationships that I got into were very much come here, go away. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. And hardly anyone talks about that stuff. And it took me years to really publicly just start talking about it. But the more I did, the more I realized how helpful it was, not only to me, but to other people. And so Neil had made a post from Amy. And I had quickly did some research on her, and I was like, wow, she sounds like she really knows her stuff. And so then I got a copy of her book, which I've not even read the whole thing yet. It's called Breakup Boot Camp. So I'm going to recommend all of you just go buy this book. It's really, really amazing. The stuff that she writes about in the first and second chapter, just on attachment, is worth your time and money on this book. And there's so much more I haven't even gotten into. So I'm going to be asking her some questions about stuff, and we'll do things there. But I'd reached out to Neil, and he said, yeah, Amy's amazing. And so then we connected, and I said, I've got so much on my plate, but this is such an important topic with breakups and stress and angst that everyone's going through in the midst of one of the craziest year I've ever experienced in my life on this planet, as it has been, I know, for many of you. And because of the work I do with people with addiction recovery, there's a lot of people that are going through so much stress right now. And so I thought the last conversation we could have, even though it's not really about marketing, I think would be really valuable to all of you. So I'm going to introduce who Amy is, and then we'll get into it. So Amy Chan is the founder of Renew Breakup Bootcamp, a retreat that takes a scientific and spiritual approach to healing the heart. The Observer calls her a relationship expert whose work is like that of the scientific Carrie Bradshaw. And her company has been featured across national media, including Good Morning America, Vogue, Glamour, Nightline, and on the front page of the New York Times. Her book, Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart, just published with HarperCollins, and her book was just featured on Good Morning America. So Amy, first off, welcome. So great to have you here. I'm so happy we're doing this.
Hi.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about how you started this in the book, but give everyone, what did I not say about you that people need to know?
Well, 10 years ago, I found myself in a bathtub contemplating how I could commit suicide without traumatizing the person who would find my body. And this was after a pretty traumatic breakup, where back then I put so much of my identity in him and us, and I was living the dream. And to me, living the dream was date, get married, have kids, be a stay-at-home wife, write on the side for fun. And when that relationship crashed, I completely crashed, and I went through depression, panic attacks, thoughts of suicide, and it was a really dark place. And if you had asked me back then if I would be here 10 years later in front of 396 people talking about heartbreak and healing and the patterns, I would have thought you were batshit crazy, but here I am.
Yeah. Well, so that's interesting. Of course, like I've said, one of my reasons for wanting to do this is just as much as anyone else, even though I'm going to play interviewer here. This subject's really important to me because over the last few years, I've had a couple of breakups that for some reason hit me really hard. I don't know if it's because of my age. I don't know if it's because of over the years, I think I've been more open and more connected. And I also think we meet people whose dents match our dents. So wherever, we're at in our lives, we tend to find people that just sort of fit those, almost like a frequency. And you explain it way more articulately in your book that I'm trying to do right now. But since the pandemic started, we're talking addictions have gone through the roof, alcohol sales through the roof, divorce rates in this country and others massively have increased. If you love your partner and you love your family, it could be really great and bonding for so many people. But if you're not in that place, it could be absolutely miserable. And I've had my heart broken quite a few times. And, I'm trying to think who said this, whatever workshop you're going through to get over your ex, they're at some sort of workshop or going through some book trying to get over you. So, we're all going through our own journeys. And so how did your boyfriend cheating on you, lead to you transforming your life? Because it sounds like a weird question, but I think many people here, when you're in the negative part of it, like Dan Sullivan says, nothing feels good in the middle. So when you're in the middle of a breakup or any painful, it's very difficult. But if you look back, that there's so many lessons that come out of these difficult things, and that's what you have been able to do, and not only to transform your life, but I think you've, even from what I've read in your book, and I've been listening to the audio also, it's just so darn valuable. So if you could maybe speak to that.
Yeah, I was a relationship columnist. I've been a relationship columnist for about 15 years. And the reason why I even got into the world of trying to understand and research the psychology of relationships was that was the one area I could just never figure out. I was an overachiever since a little kid, the child of immigrant parents. The way I got attention and love was when I did well in school and I got money. So I learned at a very young age that love was earned. And myself as a human being, I am not enough. Now, of course, I never would have realized this until, decades later through doing therapy and a lot of deep work. But that breakup was the Band-Aid that ripped off. And then I had to deal with all this compound trauma. But back then I didn't know. I just vilified my ex. I pointed the finger of blame all towards him and how unjust everything was. And I hit a tipping point of suffering. And I think it really was that moment in the bathtub. And I actually was just really trying to logically think of like, okay, if I did it this way, no, the maid would find me. If I do it this way, no, this person will find me. And because I couldn't figure out how to pull it off without traumatizing someone, that's why I didn't do it. And I cried myself to sleep that night. And when I woke up in the morning, I was like, holy shit, I am in the darkest of darkest moments right now. And I'm at a decision point. I'm either going to continue spiraling down or I am going to fight to get back up. And I decided to fight. And it did take me quite a long time to heal. I tried everything. And I am very fortunate. I had friends who would come over, bring food and watch me eat because I stopped eating. I had friends who lent me their homes because I didn't have a home to go to. And I thought about how many people who are in that position who might not have that support system. And I know that when you have no hope and you feel helpless, you are only a few bad decisions away from doing something completely destructive. And I thought, I need to create something for people who are going through this. And that's how the idea of creating a breakup boot camp came about, where people come to a physical space in nature. There's 13 different experts, from psychologists to behavioral scientists to sex educators. And we help people not only process the pain from the breakup, but also understand what are the subconscious patterns and beliefs that are causing the same emotional experience to repeat over and over again, because it's never just about the ex, it's recycled pain.
Yeah, so no, recycled pain. And the not eating thing was very interesting. It just, what it could do to impact you. Dean, so let me kind of tie in Dean Jackson into this, other than the fact that we are doing, we do our podcasts and stuff together. Dean, in your marketing creation of inventing the squeeze page back in 1997, which now hundreds of millions of people use and turned into an opt-in page, you started selling a book called Stop Your Divorce. And you went, and Homer McDonald became a good friend of yours. You taught him how to take his relationship stuff, package it, and not only did you sell millions of dollars worth of that book and transform many people's lives, but it also changed the way that he did his whole business. And so you have quite an interesting perspective of what people are looking for. In this particular case, someone wants to leave a relationship and what to do in that particular situation, which many lead to breakups. So what questions or framing would you have for Amy, and how would you like, because there's so much you could speak to on this, and I didn't want to try to guess what that would be.
Well, I think one of the things that Amy's got, anytime you're at the intersections of a acute onset with pain and urgency, a breakup, things like that, is you can go one of two ways. People can take a catalyst to go downward loop, or you can embrace it and come out of it as something amazing. And there's one of the things we talk about, Joe, on I Love Marketing, profit activator number one is select a single target audience. And people in those catalyst moments have the greatest need. You have attention then. And even though all the things that Homer would teach people would be applicable before they were to get into a situation where they were going through a divorce, just like I imagine a lot of the things that we're talking about in the breakthrough or breakup boot camp would be applicable in other areas. It's that moment that brings the opportunity to get into the conversation with people. And so I look at it. We did a 90-minute book years ago with someone called Your Breakup Breakthrough. And that's that same kind of thing, is really future pacing, that there's something great that can come from this. So I think embracing those moments is really what we've been able to see Amy doing here,
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you. Several people have commented on the recycle pain. Recycle pain is a good phrase. Curious, what's the definition of recycle pain? Which I'll ask you to maybe go elaborate a little bit more on that. Brenny wrote, recycle pain, trigger that takes you to a dark place time and time again. I want to just speak to the part about pain, because I look at many things through the lens of addiction, and I believe addiction is a solution to pain. A war on drugs is like a war on addicts. It's the wrong war. Drugs are actually the solution to the pain. Not a good solution. It's a solution that could kill you. It could cause a lot of wreckage. But when I was a drug addict, when I was dealing with sexual addiction, which is really an intimacy disorder, when I use the term sex addiction, that immediately conjures up all kinds of perspective. If anyone wants, I interviewed the top sex addiction doctor in the world a decade ago, Pat Carnes. You can type in my name and sex addiction in the YouTube. You can watch the hour and 45-minute video if you want a deep dive on that. But it's all about pain. And so, people will eat the pain away, gamble the pain away, look at the internet, fuck the pain away. There's all kinds of different ways that people deal with pain. And when you go through a breakup, you can really feel some deep wounding, and it's amazing where your mind can take you. And of course, I only can speak for where my mind has taken me. And my friend Guy Wench, he actually did a great talk on TED on breakups, and he talked about, as do you, where we can, it's almost like you start experiencing very similar signs that someone that's going through withdrawals of addiction go through. So can you speak to recycled pain and maybe define what that is? Because when you're in it, and I know some people here they're in the middle of their own experience of pain, and sometimes it feels like it's never going to go away, and you become suicidal, or you become just very depressed and you can't eat. And so speak to that, and let's look at this. What is this pain? And then we'll go into dealing with it.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Recycled pain, in the context that I'm using it, is after a breakup, you might think that it is this person or the infidelity or the rejection. And the pain is so big, or the suffering is so big. But when I look at the people who I've worked with at Breakup Bootcamp, and we peel back the layers, we see that it's not just about the ex. Sure, there is the missing, there's a relationship that fell apart, there's that, but then there's all the pain that compounded from all the heartbreaks before, right? Like for myself, mine was recycled pain because my first heartbreak was the one I had with my father, of never feeling like I was enough, of always trying to earn his love, of trying to be like, pick me, prioritize me, instead of work. And me kind of developing this addiction towards the emotional experience of chasing unavailability, right? And so it's important that we understand what is the root of the pain. What is that recycled pain that's repeating? Because it's only then we could actually start to shift the patterns. I talk about this in my book. And why do we choose people who can wound us in a very similar way, right? Because it can be confusing when you're dating, when you're in relationships, it could look like you're dating very different people. But I really encourage people, if you're not happy with the relationship outcomes you have, just take an inventory of the last 3 people you had a romantic connection with, and write down what are the 5 top feelings that you felt in this. And they could be, from joyful to anxious, and then look at what is a pattern, because there's likely an emotional experience that's repeating, although the person looks very different on the outside. So why is this? And I talk about the chemistry compass, because people after a breakup or feeling rejected, they have a tendency to think that they are broken. I hear this all the time. The rug has been ripped out from underneath me. I feel like I'm broken. And when we look at it, you're not broken. Your chemistry compass might be broken. And your chemistry compass is your internal GPS that is pointing you into the direction of who you're drawn to and who you're repulsed by. And this is determined at a very young age. There's something called attractions of deprivation. It's also in the psychology world called repetition compulsion. And this is a human being's tendency to choose people on a subconscious level that can wound us in a very similar way to how we're wounded as children. Our psyche tries to recreate the scenario of the crime in an attempt to change its ending. And so we don't know this. And I know for myself, right, in my early 20s, I only dated DJs and club owners. In my 30s, I then started dating just tech CEOs. And I was like, oh, no, totally different. There's no pattern here. But if I looked at the emotional experience, clamoring for their time, hot and cold, sometimes they'd give me like a little breadcrumb of attention, sometimes they didn't. The emotional experience with my dad, the DJ, the tech CEO, exactly the same. Anxiety, always trying to prove my worthiness, trying to be enough, trying to edit myself. And so until I was able to recognize that, I didn't have a starting point to actually creating change in myself that would actually set up a different future for myself.
Yeah, that's so good. And the way you describe it in the book about, so who were more fun, the tech CEOs or the DJs, if you just had to go back?
Tech CEOs probably better, because DJs, I was just always trying to buy them a shot, so they would pick me.
Right, exactly. So the fact that I got Dan Sullivan, who's just a dear friend, along with Babs Smith, they run Strategic Coach together. Dan has so many great quotes. Like, if you guys just want to have your brain constantly, giving you perspective, get some of Dan's quote books, which his team is compiled and they publish. You can get that stuff at strategiccoach.com. But Dan, you have this line where you're like, there's 2 types of suffering in the world, short-term and long-term. You just need to decide which kind you want. And I often wonder about the word decide, because sometimes people seem to be mired in their suffering and they don't know how to get out of that trap. And if you want to say anything to that, Dan, there's 2 things. Then I want to ask Amy, let's talk about, if you're in a place of suffering, like, what do you do? How do you get out of this? And so Dan, when you met Babs, you had gone, one thing about Dan, he declared bankruptcy and he was divorced on the same day. At what age were you, like 34 or something?
34. Yeah.
34, yeah. and then you made a decision that, you know, you don't want to work on a relationship. You just want a relationship that works, is something I've heard you say, but that doesn't mean you don't work. You've always worked on important things. But what are your perspectives on this? Because how long have you and Babs been married now?
Since '86, so 34, but we met 38 years ago. And when I got divorced, so this all happened in Canada. So I was, and in those days, in '78, when I was, you were separated for 3 years. So they had a cooling off period, and that, you know, there's traditional societies where they tried to stack the odds in favor that, you know, you could come back together again. But you had to stay apart from 3 years. There couldn't be any evidence. And I did. That wasn't a problem. And then I got divorced. And the day I got the actual divorce, I went out and I went to a cafe or a bar or something. And I made a list of what the next relationship had to be like. And it was a bit of a change for me because it wasn't what the next person had to be like, but what the relationship between us had to be like. And I think that was a big breakthrough because I was looking for a person, but actually I was looking for a relationship, a type of relationship. And I put down, I think it was like eight characteristics, but the first one is that I didn't have to work on the relationship. It wasn't competitive. And that, one of the important things for me was that it was both personal and business, that I wanted someone that it was a partnership both in business and personally. And that was the 13th of August in 1981. And on the 13th of August, 1982, I was at a weekend conference. One chair was left. I arrived late, sat down, and sitting next to me is my partner who I've been with for 38 years. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't dramatic. The neat thing about it is that I had always thought drama was a real big part of relationship. And I think what had happened was I began to realize that a sense of harmony, a sense of connection, kind of a unspoken sense of partnership was really what I was looking for. And I think over the next year, I don't think I ever told Babs, who's on our I Love Marketing call today. I never really told her much about what my list was, but over the next year or so, I said, check, 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 check. And that was what I needed. But going back to the divorce and bankruptcy day, it was in the middle of the summer. It was August, actually. And I remember walking around the next day and going to places and people were happy and they were talking. And I said, you know, I don't see anyone who's really bothered about the fact that I got divorced and bankrupt yesterday. You know, nobody seemed to be bogged down by the fact that I had had a bad day. And I said, I guess it's all my responsibility. So I said, how I handle this really is going to determine the rest of my life. So I just decided to take 100% responsibility for it, which means that you don't hold anyone else responsible for what's happened to you. And that kind of led to the strategic coach, and it led to my partnership with Babs and meeting Dean Jackson and meeting Joe Polish.
Yeah, well, no, that's awesome. And Babs, by the way, you're welcome to say something here if you'd like, if you want to unmute yourself. Now, I have a sort of a setup here too, because, and I'll tell Amy why I like calling on them. For one, there's individuals in your life that are a first domino, where there's something that happens that changes the whole trajectory of your life. Daryl Sutherland, who's on here. Giselle, can you please can you grab me the big domino? So I want the call with Amy. I want this book to be it's over here. To be a domino for you guys. So it actually, you hear something, it gives you perspective. And so I've been in strategic coach for like 23 years. And so Dan, and what they do is, thank you, has been a giant domino for me. And we've all had dominoes that are books, people, things that happen that are positive. And we also have dominoes that are extraordinarily negative. When I was raped and molested as a kid, that was a terrible domino for me that led, in so many negative ways, things in my life. But there's also been very positive things. And what Dan was saying about being responsible, I think of, responsibility as responding with ability. And when I've been through breakups where I just am in that spiral, I'm not responding to anything, I'm reacting. If that means not eating, if that means being depressed, if that means escapism, if that means self-destruction, if that means going into other toxic relationships, if whatever, that's not a good place to be in. And that's in a place of suffering, that's kind of where you're at. So Babs, since I did call on you, I'm sorry. This is what I wanted to say. First off, I love when people like Dan and Babs and Amy, I can just do anything here to, on our podcast to get them talking to each other, because Dan, you have all these influencers out there, people that are influencers, and they have millions of followers, and many of them are friends of mine. I would argue that, Strategic Coach and what Dan and Babs have created is one of the most positive influencers on the planet. The clients they have, Dan has coached more successful entrepreneurs than anyone in the world that I know. And I know people that have had millions of people go through their seminars, but the type of clients and what it is they do. So I wanted Dan and Babs to hear about this, because one of my goals is I want everyone here to be promoting the shit out of this book. If you find it valuable, and post it on social media. If this conversation helps you, tell people about it. There's a lot of people in pain right now. And if you can direct them to anything that will help them, do it. So at some point during this, if you hear a quote from Amy, please post it on social media. There's nothing in it for me here other than I like edifying people that have great stuff. And what's in it for me is it makes me feel good when someone has put work into the world, they've transformed something, and I like connecting with people, because at the end of the day, you're either connected or you're disconnected. Everything that I do is about connection. That's what Genius Network is. Genius Recovery is about connection. The opposite of addiction is connection, as Johan Hari says. And so anyway, so that's my rant, Babs. So okay. Babs, what would you say to all this craziness?
Well, when we met, I wasn't looking for anyone, and I don't think Dan was really looking for anyone either. He had his list of his relationship thing and stuff like that. But he sat down next to me, and we interacted during that weekend in the workshop, and I liked him, and it was fun interacting, doing stuff with him. And I got to know him, and we became friends, and I just loved the way he thought about things. And the way he thought about things really helped me open up and feel, make the connections in my own mind about my business and what I was doing. And it just felt so good. And there was aha moments and all that kind of stuff. And we would share about what we were doing. We weren't dating or anything, but we talked a lot on the phone and saw each other from time to time, right?
I love your side of this though, Babs. What are you looking at? What are you looking at?
What?
I love your side of this story though, because didn't you say to Dan, what are you looking at?
Oh, no, yeah, Dan was looking at me. That was the very, morning when he sat down. And, there's two sides to this story. So Dan was looking at me, and I went, what are you looking at?
Looking up, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because how much taller are you than Dan, Babs?
About 6 inches.
I'm 6'2". How tall are you, Dan?
5'8".
Right.
6 inches. But we were sitting down really, but we were just like young. Well, Dan was 30 something, but what are you looking at? And Dan said, I'm looking at you. And I said, this is what really happened. I said, yeah, and right, as you do, right? And so
38 years later, here we are.
There we go. That's all.
But it took about a year. We were just friends, and then all of a sudden, one time he was over at my house, and we were talking, and I got this funny feeling, like I was just getting used to being by myself. And that was for about a year, just by myself and being okay with that. And I had just come to the thought of, I'm really fine just being, on my own all this time. And then it was almost like, coincidentally with that, we were together talking in a room or something, and I got almost dizzy. I was like, I think, something happened. Anyway,
Well, look, bottom line, I'm glad you guys connected, because as Dan said, had he not met Babs, he would just be a drunk with a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. We connected on what he was doing, and I decided, hey, if we get together on this could go really far.
Yeah.
This could be really amazing, and
well,
it is.
Yeah, and the thing is like, I think having a powerful partnership, and certainly, I mean, you can see it. It can either make your life incredibly enhancing, or it could make your life miserable. So, and by the way, like, Amy, all of what you write about is not just your opinion. I mean, you take a very scientific based approach to this, and you cite so many things. So, what is the science behind rewiring your heart?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different ways, right, of looking at this. There's why are we drawn to people who are not good for us? This is one thing that we work with a lot on rewiring, because it actually stems from what I talked about earlier, an attraction of deprivation. So human beings, we like what is familiar. So if you grew up with a household that was chaotic, if you didn't have a healthy model of love and you didn't witness that growing up, you can get familiar with an idea of what love is. And I work with a lot of people who associate intensity, that fuck yes relationship, that I just locked eyes and I knew they were the one for me, and they think that is love. And it's not just childhood, right? Because there's many different things at play. And doesn't mean you had a bad mom and dad and they were evil or anything like that. But you're picking up different, you're getting wired from a very young age. And then there's media. And then there's the fairy tales, right? And what you see is the Romeo and Juliet. I mean, heck, they met each other for 24 hours and they were, they want to kill themselves for each other, right? I mean, the models of love that we are seeing, even if on a cognitive level, we're like, yeah, that's not really realistic, over and over again, when these stories are hammered in, you kind of absorb them through like it's osmosis. And so I think, it depends on what you're trying to rewire. And I think when it comes to people who struggle with, they only feel chemistry with the people who are the bad partner, right? The unavailable person. And then they're like, oh, yeah, sure, I meet healthy, secure people, but they're so boring. I don't feel any chemistry, right? That is a sign to me that, like, okay, let's dig a bit deeper, because that's where we might want to look at what we can rewire. And I'd love to take this opportunity to kind of talk about attachment style, because this is something you can rewire. And for those of you who are new to attachment theory, basically the idea is around 2 years old, we develop an attachment system which will pretty much determine how we relate romantically as adults. There's 3 main types. There's secure, avoidant, and anxious. Secure makes up about 50% of the population. They're not afraid of intimacy. They're also not codependent. They're able to communicate their needs and their boundaries. And when there is a conflict that comes up in the relationship, they don't blow it out of proportion and see it like, oh my God, it's over. So they can move through the ups and downs of relationships. Now, the next kind is avoidant. Avoidantly attached people subconsciously suppress their attachment system. What does this mean? It means when someone gets a little bit too emotionally close, they will do things called deactivating strategies to squelch intimacy. This might look like, say you go on a romantic weekend with someone and say they have an avoidant attachment style, and suddenly they're gone for a week. They go into their cave. Or if you have an avoidant attachment style, you might constantly idolize an ex Or you'll date someone first 3 months, it's great. And then you start noticing all their imperfections and you're like, not the one. So there's this constant pursuit of a unicorn or someone with an impossible future. These are all ways of actually not, of keeping people not emotionally close. And it doesn't mean that avoidants can't be in relationships or say that they want a relationship. They just associate intimacy with a loss of independence, and they have a tendency to feel suffocated and a lot of pressure in their relationships. This usually comes from parents who enmeshed them as a child. Then there's anxiously attached. 90% of the people I work with are anxiously attached people. They take breakups the absolute hardest because they put a lot of their sense of identity into their relationship and the validation from their partner. And so people who have an anxious attachment style, they fear abandonment and rejection. And when they're triggered, say they text and it takes 4 hours for the person that they're dating to text them back, they actually go into fight or flight. And to them, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. They almost feel this anxiety of like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And they will actually do what's called protest behavior. This might look like, what I used to be an anxiously attached person. I'm now what's called an insecure. You might call like crazy. This was me in my 20s. I would call like crazy, show up at the club, be like, oh, you work on Fridays? Even though it's like their night, and then I realized like, oh shit, like this is like stalker behavior. And then you'll go to the other side of the extreme and you're like, oh, it takes you 4 hours to text me back. Fuck you, I'll take 4 days, see how you like it. Or you might hedge. You might date different people just because the person you really like, you don't know if they're going to dump you, if they're going to reject you, and to take the edge off, you date other people. Now, anxiously attached people are drawn avoidance and vice versa. They both confirm each other's worldview. So, as I write out those different characteristics of attachment, you might resonate with one. There is a quiz. Feel free. You can email me. It's also, in the book, you can find out your attachment style. And the goal is to actually become more secure. And also it's important to understand that attachment is on a spectrum. So, in the middle of a pandemic, when maybe you lost your job, you're not seeing your friends, you might normally be more secure, but suddenly you feel a lot more anxious. So it does depend on who you're dating, and it depends on what else is going on in your life.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Dean, what were you going to say?
No, I was listening in, and everybody, you immediately see yourself in those descriptions. I think everybody on here, if you were listening, would see what your attachment style is. It's fascinating.
Yeah, when I was listening to the audio version of Amy's book a couple days ago, with her going through all the attachment styles, like I said earlier, get the book just for the description of what she said. Yeah, I could see my dysfunction in so many of these things, and also stemming where it came from. Because I have a friend named Dr. Don Woods, who used to be a former professional hockey player, and I met him at the Spartan World Championships, where we were both speaking at Lake Tahoe last year. And he helps take people through trauma. And he has this great line where he says, if you understood the atmospheric conditions of somebody's life, it would make sense why they do what it is they do, why they behave the way they do. And I've always liked that terminology, atmospheric conditions, and seeing these attachment styles. I mean, it does make sense, and to have that insight and perspective is valuable. I want to actually, this is going to seem kind of weird, but I have so many great friends that are on today, and I wish I could call on all of them. David Bach is in the house. Amy, do you know David Bach?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so David is one of the top selling authors in the world, sold millions of copies of books, Automatic Millionaire, Smart Women Finish Rich, The Latte Factor. I mean, he's amazing. And he's been through a divorce. And now his partner's amazing, his new wife. And David, I'd almost like to ask you a couple of things. For one, David's been on Oprah more than anyone I know. I mean, dozens of times. And he's done so much media, and he's sold so many books, and he's helped so many people. I met him through Strategic Coach, and he's the one that really inspired me to do a sabbatical, because in 2013, he took a 1-year sabbatical because he had gotten totally burnt out. And I put the 10-minute talk that he gave in 2015 at Genius Network annual event on joesabbatical.com, so people can actually watch a really great talk about sabbaticals, because David really knows his stuff. But David, two things. Anything you want to say to the subject matter here with Amy? And since we're on I Love Marketing, and this is kind of like one of these weird like topics that we, not weird topic, but weird that we put it on I Love Marketing, because I know it'll be so helpful to people. What advice would you have for Amy to get such an important message out to millions of people? Because you are an expert at that.
Wow. Well, okay, before I answer that question, I just, everything, I'm such a big believer that things happen for a reason. I literally just, I was at the top of Piazza Michelangelo in Florence, Italy. I live in Florence, Italy, everybody. And I just took my son to the top of Piazza Michelangelo to see the giant Christmas tree. It's not as big as the one at Rockefeller Center, but it's close. So I normally would not be on email, because that's kind of my policy. It's, Dan, I actually follow Dan's rules, and I don't get on email late, but I looked at my phone and I see Joe Polish is going live before he takes a sabbatical. I'm like, what? It's like a going away party. I have to get on this call and say hi to you, Joe. So, buddy, I'm so excited that you're doing this sabbatical. And I know you and I've talked a lot this year, but I'm just really, really, really happy for you. And then to see Dan, Babs, Dean, it's like a reunion party. Yeah, it's just amazing. So it's so good to be here. And Amy, nice to meet you. You know, I have to say, just listening to you, you have so much energy and so much passion for your topic that you're gonna reach millions of people with it, and so many people need your help. And I am just so grateful that I'm no longer dating. Listening to you, I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky. I found the right person. I found my soulmate, and thank God I didn't marry the one before her, because she was all those crazy things you were just talking about. So, you know what, I'm a big, look, you know, Joe Polish, now you know everybody. So the thing about your message is that I would say to anybody, the most important thing when you have a message to share is that you have to remember that you love your message more than anybody in the world. And if you do, and you're passionate about that message, and you come from a place of service, there's just nothing that can stop you. And I think so often people focus on bestseller lists, which, you know, I get a lot of credit for being on bestseller lists, but the reality is it's not about the bestseller list. It's about how many people you touch. And it's about constantly coming from a place of service. How can I be of service for what it is you personally care about? And, you know, I'm still doing, it's crazy, but I'm still doing Smart Women Finish Rich seminars. And I started this in 1993. And so I'm still as passionate about the things that I teach as I was back in 1993 and 1994 and 1995. And by the way, your passions may change. You may change what you're passionate about in 5 or 10 years, and that's okay too. But right now, you just got to go share your message with every single human being you possibly can in every possible way that is doable. And the beauty today is it's never been easier. You don't need to be on a national television show, because you can go do things like this constantly.
Thank you.
No, exactly, exactly. And you know, there's something to be said about perseverance. There's something to be said about being aligned, because when you find what you're aligned with, yeah, that's where so much energy comes from that. That's the distinction I make between elf versus half. You know, you can have an elf business, easy, lucrative, and fun, or a half business, which is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. It could be hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating. But there's a lot of people that are half. You know, it's not just how you spend your time, but it's what you're aligned with. And so, and I'll tell you, if you're going through a lot of pain, it's hard to make anything work. And so in a lot of ways, you know, my whole thing is I sell people what they want and do our best to give them what they need. That's sort of a whole thing. So they always want to talk about marketing and making money and do all. And I'm the last person to ever poo-poo money. I think people say money can't buy happiness is kind of stupid, because I buy happiness all the time. And if you're a miserable bastard with money, you just haven't given enough of it away, because you can really help a lot of people if you have financial resources. So that's a critical thing. But I'll tell you, just having money but not having relationships, not feeling connected is a very painful place to be in, because I can tell you, I know a lot of billionaires and a lot of very famous people that are addicts that are just broken, and their hearts are broken, and they did not recover. And that's why I think Amy's topic and this subject is so darn critical, especially right now, because the world is in a lot of complexity and a lot of pain, and knowing how to navigate it is critical. Amy, I want to read something, because it kind of ties into what David was saying about, you know, finding his love relationship. Now, you posted this, and I asked Eunice, my assistant, to print this out, and you titled it "Stop Looking for See where it says, she didn't say fuck. She put an asterisk, but I'm just going to use, sorry for the profanity, but it's just more effective if I say it. So spoiler alert, it's not about love. You just posted this, I think, yesterday. Yeah. And on Facebook, if you guys want to go get a copy, you can read it on her page. Fuck yes, relationships are about intensity. The one, the soulmate, the you'll just know I can't live without you kind of love. That's not love, it's fantasy, fueled by lust, a side of codependency, a dash of insecure attachment, and a sprinkle of love addiction. Instead of questing for a fuck yes relationship, perhaps a more sustainable approach would be to cultivate one. Maintenance, commitment, making an effort, even when you don't have the chemical momentum of lust to motivate you. Choosing love, even when you don't feel like it that day. Communicating like an adult. Seeing someone as the human they are, not a projected fantasy of what you want them to be. It's not the sexy stuff motivational quotes are made of. I love that line, because if you just look at Instagram and, oh, these fall in love, it's such a facade in so many ways. So I'll read that again. It's not the sexy stuff motivational quotes are made of. No, the everyday mundane choices we make show up.
Going back. Oh, sorry.
As a fuck yes partner comes down to good old fashioned hard work, discipline, commitment, and effort. Writer Damien Baller, hopefully I'm pronounced that right, articulates this beautifully. Life is completely composed of mediocre, mundane, and difficult tasks and experiences, yet it is the accumulation of the mundane, like preparing a garden bed from scratch, that leads to the flowering of something beautiful. The early stages, cutting the weeds, tilling the soil, none of that is actually very fun. Yet walking through an abundant garden, picking flowers and fruits and vegetables, it comes from the process of small, repeated, intentional tasks. Fuck maybe love. Perhaps that's a more realistic goal. The one that starts off with a slow simmer of curiosity that can eventually boil into something delicious. It isn't black or white and honors the shades of gray. It's the marathon approach versus the sprint. It's reality-based, not fantasy-fueled. I thought that was like amazing what you wrote. So let's speak to that, because a lot of people, they just like, oh, it needs to be this thing. And so,
Yeah, I think that, thanks for bringing that up and reading it so beautifully. I wrote that because I don't know if any of you guys have ever read Mark Manson's piece on, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. And I used to subscribe to that. And I would get into these romances that were so like in the beginning, like, oh my God, like soulmate, the one, fuck yes. And they would fizzle and they would burn pretty intensely. And, through experience and through doing this work, I really realized that all those times I thought it was the one, it was fantasy fueled. It was, codependency, it was projection. And I had this idea of what love was. Again, we talked about this earlier, like that it's this intense thing, but that's not love. And so I think it's really screwing up an entire generation of people, because when you're looking at that as a standard for love, you are picking people, especially if you have a broken chemistry compass, you're feeling chemistry with people, that fuck yes energy with people who can subconsciously wound you in a way that you're familiar with. So instead of it being a green light when you get that, oh my God, fuck yes, it's actually a sign of like your subconscious radar is picking them up and they're picking out that they can wound you. And it's actually a red stop sign. And also what happens when you start off and you have a relationship and you go through life, right? I mean, Dan, I'm sure in your relationship, there's been ups and there's been downs. And like, what happens when it's not fuck yes the whole time? Do you just abandon it? And so I think we need to, if we're going to have a more fulfilled outcome in our relationships, we need to start to look at our definition of what love and relationships are, because what a lot of us are fed and think that we think is love is not love. And I think we need to be more realistic. And this also means when I go talk about chemistry compass and rewiring that, the very first thing you want to do is you're not going to go from choosing people who are toxic and who are intense and off and on to suddenly the next person is secure and stable and reliable. Your brain is going to reject it because it's so foreign to you. You almost need to increase your tolerance to what healthy feels like. And that's why I always encourage people, and I've done this on myself too, conduct a dating experiment. Date 10 people who are completely outside of your type, older than you, younger than you, just different, because you will be so surprised that when you give people a chance, you might be pleasantly surprised that you actually don't have this one type. And Dan, you mentioned it earlier. It's not a list of like, oh, you have to be this tall, you have to whatever. It's how do I want to feel? What type of relationship do I want? That's your list, not how much money do they make? Are they blonde? That's bullshit. That's what's keeping you miserable in love.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just ranted.
No, I like it. I like rants. I like when people have some energy behind it. So Dean Jackson, holler at us. What's going through your head right now?
I think as we're listening, all of these things that she's sharing are applicable to anybody, no matter what stage of a relationship they're in. They're seeking one, they're in one, they're in a happy one, they're in a troubled one, they're just going through a breakup. But the catalyst that she's chosen to get people into the conversation is that juncture of the breakup. That, now when people go through a breakup, they feel like now I can seek out something. Right. And what we found with Stop Your Divorce was that all of the information in there would be even more applicable to people who are in a relationship or seeking one, but it's not on the top of anybody's to-do list at that point. Right. Like then the market for Stop Your Divorce is bigger than or more intense than the market for improve your relationship. And that's really a thing that all the people, even though if they could get it ahead of time, that it would be so much more transforming for them. It's like as soon as somebody says, that's it, I've had enough, I want a divorce, or I'm breaking up with you, it's like the ice has like now crashed below them, and they would do anything just to get back on stable ground. It's like it's like something that immediately it changes your priorities, just like I'm pregnant, or you've got cancer or health diagnosis, or something that is acute onset with pain and urgency is a catalyst. It's fascinating, but that, I think from a marketing standpoint, these things, the people who get the book could be the conveyors of the information to other people, because I imagine that once people get the information and embrace it, that they want to share it with everybody, because now they've had a transformation and they know how things are different. And people who are struggling in a relationship or choosing the wrong guys, I bet that they're quoting Amy to their friends saying, you know what, he's an avoidant attachment guy. That's the problem there. Or you're an anxious attacher. And they're starting to diagnose people. And this kind of knowledge, you could basically take this book and 90% of it stay the same, repackage 10% of it to frame it from another perspective, and have something that is applicable to people not going through a breakup,
Yeah. Dean, it's like hurt people, healed people, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And as they're healing, it's like giving people, this, because what you've got is information and technologies kind of thing that can help people at any stage.
Yeah. Joe, can I just, I saw someone made a joke about how my dating experiment is like the VC approach. I do want to make a note about the whole dating 10 people experiment, which I've done on myself. I used to have a very broken chemistry compass. Like I said, it would point me towards people who are unavailable. And for the longest time, I just pathologized them as narcissists or unavailable without looking at what I was doing, how I was accountable for repeating this emotional experience. And so when I realized that, I was a common denominator, I did this dating experiment, and I went on dates with people who I didn't have an immediate romantic chemistry with, but they were available, they looked secure, and they were intentionally wanting to date me. And I did this for 7 months, and I would do 2 to 3 dates per person. And I was very open with, like, hey, you know, if I didn't like them, I would say, like, I remember this one guy named Carter, he's in the book. I said, hey, I don't feel like a romantic attraction, but if you want to hang out as like friends, I'm totally cool. And he's like, yeah, no pressure. Like, I think you're an awesome human. Would love to get to know you. And I was doing this dating experiment, and there were like really lovely people. One showed up with croissants. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But I don't feel chemistry. This is boring. And 7 months into the experiment, I was like, oh, this experiment doesn't work. And remember I was having dinner with Carter. This was probably our 10th time hanging out. And over dinner, we were talking, and I remember this key moment when I just looked across the table and I was like, oh.
What are you looking
And
at?
just like that, I recognized that I had a romantic attraction to him. And my dating experiment did work, because if it wasn't for all those people from before, I was slowly, gradually increasing my tolerance to healthy. And I was building my familiarity of like, oh, this is how stable feels like. Oh, this is how, when someone's thoughtful, that's how it feels like. And that was helping me rewire my old script from before. And here's the thing about attraction. Your brain might not cognitively process it as attraction. And so sometimes it takes time for you to actually understand that it's attraction, because the brain actually has 3 different mating drives, and they're actually there's 3 different chemicals. There's lust, which is driven, testosterone driven. That is that immediately, oh my gosh, I see you, I'm attracted to you. That's really Mother Nature's way of having you procreate with as many people as you possibly can, or have sex with as many people as you can, right? And the second mating drive is attraction. That enables you to zone in on one person, and that's when you feel kind of obsessive, when it's all filled with dopamine. It feels amazing when your love is returned. It feels awful when it's not. And then there's a third, which is attachment and bonding. And this is vasopressin, and it's oxytocin, and it's a bonding hormone. The same hormones that are secreted when a mother gives birth or when she's breastfeeding. Love can be sparked by any one of the mating drives. So we're used to the storyline of love is only sparked through lust. You see someone, you immediately feel, and if you don't, then it's not. But that's why you might know someone who they were best friends and then they got together, right? They had the attachment and then the lust came later. Same thing happened with my dating experiment. I got to know this guy named Carter through time, and I got to know his character, his values. And over time, the lust sparked afterwards. So I just want to explain how you can start to rewire your chemistry compass if you find that yours has been pointing you in the wrong direction.
Awesome. Amy, let me ask you this, because I've had about 4 people that are on right now that are in relationships, and there's been stages where the relationships have been awesome, and right now they're going through struggling. Yeah. And they wanted to come on here to actually see what they can learn and how to help. What advice would you give? Because in the midst of, how has COVID altered both, the relationship dynamics and, what you're seeing with people breaking up?
So the pandemic has been the great accelerator of relationships. So it's either helped people recognize that they could be in a great partnership with their best friend, or, people who are dating, it's accelerated because like, wow, we're not killing each other and we've been quarantined for 45 days. And it's kind of pushed them into commitment. Or if there was any cracks in the foundation, the house is falling down. And so, divorce rates have skyrocketed, breakups have skyrocketed. And so, yeah, I think with the pandemic, the issues that could have been swept under the rug, right? Because you're traveling, because you're working so much, all these things, you have to confront them. And it's the same thing with people who are really suffering too. Those issues that you might have been avoiding or distracting or reaching for your vice, whatever that vice is, you got to confront it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So I've written some questions down here. I'm looking at them, which ones I think would be most valuable for everyone. So if someone is in a relationship that they know they need to end, what is the first step you would recommend?
Yeah, so I love to take one step before that is some people don't know when the relationship should end because they're caught in what's called sunk cost fallacy. So if there's anyone out there who you're in a relationship that is, either unhealthy or toxic and you're kind of feeling stuck, think about this. Sunk cost fallacy happens when we play the stock markets. It is our tendency to invest more into something we've already invested in, whether it's time, money, pain. It's the same reason why if you buy a ticket to a movie, you hate it in the first 20 minutes, you watch the whole thing because you already bought the ticket. Same thing happens in relationships. We say, well, I gave this person the best years of my life, and you're hoping for it to change. And instead of focusing on present and future value, you're focusing on what you've already invested. So I think first thing is ask yourself, if you were to make the same decision right now and you have to forget about what you've invested because that's gone, would you choose this person today? And I think that this can apply to other things, from jobs to even friendships. And then, after you've made the decision that a breakup is necessary, after the breakup, you need to have a full detox. And I like to say 60 days, because when you're in the relationship, you have neural pathways that have been wired together. If you afterwards keep looking at text messages or you even call them up to ream them out, you're still getting that emotional charge and you're not allowing those neural pathways to prune away. And I look at it like this: if you're still analyzing your ex, blaming your ex, vilifying your ex, you're still in a relationship with your ex. It doesn't matter if it's days, months, or years.
Yeah, totally. Really good. So with so that question, if someone's in a relationship they need to end, what's the first step you'd recommend? The other question I actually had is it's almost the same thing. If someone's looking for a relationship right now, what's the very first step you would recommend?
Well, I have been telling people to try the dating experiment. I think this pandemic is an opportune time to do so. I work with a lot of people who are not happy with the relationship outcomes. And it's like you baking a cake, right? You're baking a cake and you're like, I can't have dairy. It makes me sick. But you keep using milk and you make a cake out of dairy because, there's no almond milk and you need to make the almond milk. We don't want to do the work up front. So right now, do the work up front. Change the ingredients. Otherwise, you're going to still make this cake made with milk that's going to make you sick. So try the dating experiment. Also, if you are someone that has been a slave to chemistry, consider this. The foundation of a relationship or a partnership, you need a combination of chemistry, timing, and compatibility. And if you've been a slave to chemistry, I would actually take a look at what are the values that are important. There is an exercise in the book on doing a values checklist where you actually assess your own top 10 values. You look at the last 3 people you've dated. You also rate them on their values, and that will give you an idea. Are you actually choosing people who are similar and scoring similar to you in your values, or is it going down or is it going higher? I think that would give you a good starting point to see if you need to maybe, not just give so much priority to the chemistry.
I love it. And by the way, I'm just noticing that our brilliant Genius Network member and psychiatrist, Sam Karashi, is on right now. He's in Saudi Arabia right now. Sam, I want to put you on the spot a little bit because I'm going to recommend that you do an Instagram live at some point with Amy, because Sam has over 700 and something thousand people that follow him on Instagram. He puts really conscious, thoughtful content out there. He recently did interviews with James Nestor, who wrote the book Breath, who he met at our Genius Network meeting, which is a great book. And then BJ Fogg, who is the Stanford professor, who's one of his students, created Instagram. And BJ wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And Sam has been doing these lives with things that would be helpful. And Sam, what are your thoughts on what you've heard from Amy so far? Because you've been through a whole slew of dealing with people over the years with relationship issues, because you are a psychiatrist. But also, I'd like to have you, do a live with Amy, because I know you have the ability to move a boatload of books, and I also know how you're able to reach many people all over the world that can't get access to this in other ways or won't. They don't know about it. So, what are your thoughts?
First of all, it's good to see you, Joe, and thank you for that incredible intro. Amy, it's an absolute pleasure to connect with you, and I'd be honored to interview you. I love the way you're phrasing things. The linguistics of the way you're describing things is just, to me, incredible. I was just constantly commenting on that and thinking about what you're saying. I think it's really important for us to tackle it in a multiple, from different angles, but at the same time, the idea of healing, you're talking about the recycled pain. I'm thinking of the emotional wound that hasn't healed. We constantly assume that we're attracted to the people that we think will give us what we lack, when in fact, we are attracted to the people that can reveal to us the wounds we haven't yet healed. And what you're actually talking about is healing that wound. If we heal that wound, suddenly our filter, our lens through which we see people will change. We're not going to choose people for the wrong reasons anymore. And because we did the inner work, we healed ourselves, and then we can actually choose better. So I love what I'm hearing. I can't wait to buy the book, and I'd be honored to interview you.
Thank you.
Perfect. See, I'm just doing what I normally do, is I just connect people, and then people think I'm cool or something for some reason, but it helps me make up for my low self-esteem, so I can at least feel like I'm useful in the world. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate it. And yeah, watch some of Sam's stuff. He puts great stuff out there. The live he just did with BJ Fogg and James Nestor, and he's good buddies with Wim Hof. He's had Wim Hof on his show like a couple times, and Sam's awesome. So Dean Jackson, you tend to say smart things and ask smart questions when I'm not totally dominating the whole conversation and being the jackass that I am. So I've got some more questions for Amy, and I've got a couple of people that I want to call on to ask questions, and I do want to open it up to everyone that's here.
Yeah.
So what I want to.
I mean, you see what a chord we've struck here, because here we're, it's way over an hour we've been going, and we're like still going strong with no end in sight, and that's pretty amazing. All these things are so universal, and that's where we talk about the our focus on health, wealth, and elf, and this whole thing of bringing outside kind of perspectives here, because if you're a happier person, you're a healthier person in all ways, you're going to be a better entrepreneur. And so it's not just the same, not just, we're known for focusing on the marketing stuff, but it's so much a holistic approach. And I think this kind of information, and I'm always looking for the marketing lessons in everything. And that's what I've been kind of chiming in with some of the things that are actually at work here. And so I think it's been exciting.
Well, here's what I'd like to ask everyone on a scale of 1 to 10, with what Amy has shared so far and what we've discussed, 10 being the best, 1 being you don't like it at all. Could you at least rate it so we can let Amy see what people are getting out of this? Take a look at that. Well, I'm sorry, Amy, they don't seem to like it so far. Everything is a 10 and over a 10, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. That was a million. That was.
I love the overachievers doing a million.
Yeah. Well, so good. And thank you guys so much. There are some really great comments in here. I unfortunately, it's hard for me to read them all because I'm quite distractible. But Dave Streen, you actually were instrumental. You and Charlie have been running the I Love Marketing Meetup group here in Arizona. And once the pandemic started, we ended up doing it. You were doing one live, and because of that, it ended up leading to us doing these meetup groups live via Zoom. And you had a question, and I want to give you the first opportunity to ask a question to Amy, if you could.
Awesome. So, Amy, this has been fantastic. I've learned so much, taken a bunch of notes. I wasn't sure it was going to resonate with me because I met my wife when I was 19 years old. I like to say we've been happily married for 10 years, going on our 25th anniversary as a joke and stuff. But no, she's amazing. When you first described the breakup, obviously that's a lifetime ago for me going through that, but it triggered, it sounded almost identical to a business partnership breakup that I went through. And so I wanted to kind of see, do you think your book kind of skirts with that and would help people through those things? Because I've gone through some bad business breakups that, again, when you described the breakup experience, I was like, oh my God, that's the same exact thing.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for
So,
sharing.
yeah.
I think that rejection, like when there's a breakup of any sort, right, whether it's friendship or professional or romantic, there's a sense of rejection. And human beings are wired to actually really have an adverse reaction to rejection, because back in the day, rejection from the tribe could mean death. And so I think that even in a business breakup, you still go through the stages of separation. So the stages of separation on a heartbreak romantic, it starts off with shock, then it is denial, then sadness and depression, then anger, and then it goes back to another stage of denial and possibly relapse, where you're like, oh, maybe it's not so bad, maybe I can salvage this. And then you do that enough times and you're like, oh no, this is terrible. And then you get to a stage of acceptance. So Dave, I would ask you, when you went through your business breakups, was that a similar kind of stage process? And again, it's not linear. You can bounce back, but you do hit the different stages.
Definitely. So yeah, I'm gonna pick up your book now and check it out. So I think that's really gonna help me, because that's very cool. But yeah, very similar. I never realized how closely related those could be.
Yeah.
You know what, Dave? Like so much of, I think, the draw for me originally to Amy and her book was not just love relationships and things, but it's just relationships in general. Just going through the ending of certain things, or when you're dealing with betrayal and stuff like that. Like Amy, when someone has been deeply betrayed and they lose faith in humans, they quit. They don't trust. They're just badly wounded. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think that there's different stages of dealing with the pain and the trauma, and it's important to honor what stage you're at, because there's different strategies depending on where you're at. Right in the very beginning, you want to honor the feelings, right? You don't want to label them as good or bad. I think that especially in North America, we label the feelings of sadness or anger like bad, and there's extra shame. And I deal with a lot of overachievers. So overachievers have a tendency like, this is terrible, I want it over, like get me through this. And they want to fast forward out of the pain. Thing is, the pain needs air to breathe. And if you just shove it down, this, you've talked about this in your own work, it's going to show up in either another relationship, in another behavior, it's going to come out somehow. So I think the very beginning is just processing and not judging yourself, and allowing yourself to go through all of it, because I look at it as, whenever I'm crying, I look at it as tears as pain exiting my body. And I'm like, oh, I'm just expanding my emotional range. How fortunate am I able to feel all of it, right? And so I really have reframed my approach to how I look at these emotions versus just going to a shame spiral. So I think there's that in the very first stage. And then I think the second stage is practicing compassion. And I don't mean this in a fluffy, like, oh, just like think positive. I mean this as, compassion is a muscle that you build. And the more you practice it, the stronger it gets. And compassion is very necessary because it is a critical ingredient for forgiveness, letting go, and acceptance. And you can't just get to forgiveness of someone else or human beings and the world if you don't have compassion for yourself first. There's tons of things you can do. Kristen Neff is an amazing thought leader on this. She has free guided meditations. Do this every day for 30 days. You will feel a difference. So I think that would be the next thing. And the third part, is when you can get into more the cognitive thing, right? Because it's very easy right now for me to look back and be like, oh, the dots all connected. The worst thing was the best thing. But when if you say that to someone who's just right after a trauma or a breakup or, rejection, that is actually shaming. Don't ever say to someone, just be stronger. It happens for a reason, because they can't cognitively get it at that stage. So I think once they've kind of hit a little stage afterwards, that's when you could start thinking about, okay, where am I accountable? What are the patterns here? How can I start shifting this? How can I use this as a catalyst to transform my life? Because pain is an excellent catalyst. So that's how I would approach that. And I just want to leave one last thing is whether you're dealing with pain from a professional breakup, a friendship, a relationship, or you've been betrayed, I think one of our coping mechanisms is to close. And so I say that our greatest lesson in this lifetime is to practice opening our hearts, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And I remind myself that when I feel hurt and I'm like, hell no, am I going to allow this person or this event have me close up? And I'm like, I'm just going to open it up even bigger. And I really hope that whatever situation you're in right now in your life, that you can take that and remember that even when it hurts, especially when it hurts.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good, Amy. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Okay,
fun.
Awesome. Andrew, you had a question, Andrew Wyndham. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, Amy. Hey, thanks for being on. I kind of play in the college space. When I reworked my life, I had to figure out a place that I felt like I could make contribution. And so to this impact, I play with a lot of teenagers and college kids as they're making huge college decisions and all those things. But the number one feedback we got recently was parents challenged with adulting and their ability to make to transition into mature relationships. So to that end, as a parent and somebody who works with a lot of teenagers and college kids, what's the impact of age given, the testosterone, all of those different chemicals? Any insight on where those impact based off of age? And then number two, any just quick 1, 2, 3 how-tos that as a parent or as a coach or somebody who's interacting with kids at this age that we can teach them to build the right relationship muscles and healthy processes to start with, so that they don't have to come unwind all this stuff and go through, all the hurt, right? It's the pound of prevention, deal, so to speak.
I hear you. So, I always say never trust someone who's never gone through a heartbreak. And so as much as, as parents and as teachers, we don't want people to go through it. I do think that it is important because it teaches you compassion and empathy and it's character building. And so I don't have any specific data on age and heartache and the transition, but I will say that, part of that journey is there's knowledge that you can learn, right? You can go to a retreat, you can read a book, but it isn't until you actually go and do the thing. And then you might even relapse. And then you have the knowledge so that the next time do things differently. That's when we integrate the knowledge into wisdom. And so I would never take away that experience from someone, but I do think arming people with tools so that they don't have to suffer is important, right? I think a lot of people on this chat are agreeing pain is actually not a bad thing. Pain is a messenger. Pain is that whisper that's saying, come on, listen, something's off. Listen to me, reassess. And so often we just ignore it until that gets louder and louder, until that pain, it starts screaming. And then you have this big blow up or a breakup. And so, I would teach these younger people just tools for emotional regulation, labeling the emotion, right? They've done research that shows that even just by labeling, oh, I'm feeling the emotion of anger. Where do you feel it in the body? Just by doing that, it actually helps minimize the stress and the intensity of the emotion. I think emotional literacy is really important. And if you can learn that at a young age, that's great. Second, what are the coping mechanisms? Because behind when we look at adults, behind every defensive adult is a wounded child, right? We learn these ways of dealing with pain, with rejection, anger, all these things at a young age, right? Do we withdraw? and go into a hole, right? How often do you see this in your relationships now? Like when you deal with someone and they just stonewall, right? When you look at that, that's like a 5-year-old who learned at a very young age. Maybe they were shamed for feeling sad or for crying. And they learned that the only way to be safe there was to hide in their room and not deal with it. And so I think, you know, whatever age you're at, you can look at what is your automatic go-to reaction. And then look at, well, where did that come from? And how can you respond in a healthier way? I think that's great. And, you know, another thing is, a lot of younger people, especially when it comes to their first love, there's a lot of angst involved, right? And this is totally normal. And I think that for anyone who feels that anxiety, a really great hack is the minute you feel that anxiety, you want to do a state change, because you can't talk your way out of it likely at that point. It's your amygdala going off, and you probably are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And so if you look at what gazelles do in the wild, you'll see that when they see a threat, and then they see that, oh, they're actually okay, they start shaking their body and it looks like they're convulsing, and then they move along. So what they're doing is they're actually shaking off all that excess stress hormones, the adrenaline and the cortisol. Human beings, we need to do the same thing. So, you know, I would suggest this. I do this as myself. I get a shitty email, a work email, and I've had to do this. I just did this last week. I set a timer for 2 minutes and I shake my body from head to toe. After that, I do deep breathing. I do the 4-7-8 breath. What's important is that you just make your exhale longer than the inhale. That will calm you down. If you start learning that little emotional hack at a young age, you will find that the more you repeat this, you're almost like a ninja through the different emotions and situations that happen in life. And then you don't kind of blow up in these like terrible email replies when you're pissed off. I hope that helped.
No, I actually think everything you just shared was so damn valuable. I mean, I've always loved the line, "The issues are in the tissues," and it is in your body. And Gina on my team, if you could post the interview with my buddy Andrew Weil, he actually takes people through the breathing technique. I'd like to introduce you to Andrew also, since you quote him in your book, Amy. Talk about Breakup Bootcamp and Renew. How do people actually take your training and your course if they want to do it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I used to have physical retreats, but it's on hold because of the pandemic. So now we offer online intensives. I bring in, 10 different experts, from psychologists, behavioral scientists, sex educators, even a dominatrix who teaches on the psychology of power dynamics. And we help people learn the tools for emotional regulation and really learn what are those subconscious beliefs and patterns that are causing the same emotional experience. And we help them rewire that. People think that they're coming because of an ex. Again, I'll say it again, it's never just about the ex, it's recycled pain. So we really look at the underbelly, the foundational layer. Why did you feel like the rug was ripped out from underneath you in the first place? How did you get to a point where you put so much of your sense of worth onto a relationship? Those are the bigger questions. So yeah, you can look it up at renewbreakupbootcamp.com. So I do the online events and soon the physical events, hopefully.
Mhm.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Dean, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, and I'll make a recommendation for stuff. I'm going to make another introduction to you and Amy. You already know Michael, but Dr. Michael Bruce, are you on? Can you unmute yourself if you're there and say something?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Wonderful. Well, okay, so here's why. Okay, so Michael Bruce is literally one of the top sleep doctors in the world. His website is thesleepdoctor.com. He's been on Oprah multiple times. He's been on Dr. Oz a whole bunch of times. He's absolutely brilliant. He's a psychologist. Very, very, very valuable and helpful. And I think with what Amy's doing and the work you do and the sleep you do, I think you and Amy need to know each other. What's the link between sleep and fatigue and stress and all that? And what are your thoughts on everything that you've heard? And that's the first part. And the second thing, so I don't forget, is when I go on sabbatical, I'm going to be gone. But we're going to continue with these meetings, and Tim Polson is going to host some. Dean Jackson, they'll do it together. Other people that are part of the thing. I'd love Dean for you to actually do a session with Michael Bruce related to sleep. And so I just wanted to make that commitment because I know it'll be so darn valuable for everyone. Because yeah, so I just want you guys to know that. So Michael, you and Amy, I'd like you guys to somehow connect and do something cool. But what is your take on what you've heard so far?
So first of all, thank you so much, Joe, and thank you to the Genius Network for having me as part of this. It's always such an honor to be here. Amy, your stuff is awesome. I think what you're doing is super cool. I will tell you, I've saved more marriages as a sleep doctor than I ever would have as a marital therapist, just by dealing with the sleep-related issues that come with relationships. I mean, in all honesty, I would say 75% to 80% of my patients show up as couples, and one person is pissed off at the other person. They're either not sleeping or they're snoring, and and both of those situations are incredibly disruptive to the couple. From a stress and from a COVID standpoint, I mean, give me a fucking break. Like, it hits sleep so damn hard. It's unbelievable. And, you know, people are calling me constantly now and they're saying things like, oh my God, you know, my sleep is all messed up. Things like, actually, the last time I was on, I think it was Sam Q, maybe, who reminded us all that the sleep deprivation, what was it, Sam? Wasn't it like sleep deprivation? Yeah, Karashi, that's what it was. So it was the sleep deprivation was like 11 days or something
11
like
days,
that.
yes.
11.
That's the record. Yeah.
Right. So I think that somebody will break that record after a breakup, because every time I talk to these people after they've had these major traumatic relationship events, they're not sleeping for days, or they weren't sleeping beforehand, and then they're making really bad decisions because they're so damn sleep deprived. And one of the first things that I talk about with couples is, before you decide to do anything, let's get you both sleeping better, because it's really, really hard to make any type of an emotional commitment or decision in any way, shape, or form unless you are well slept. I also want to talk very quickly about what Amy talked about the shaking off. So that's 100% correct. It's actually, I have a new book that's going to be coming out, and I talk a lot about energy during the day. And it's a great way to shake off negative energy and to insert positive energy. And I know, Joe, that's something that you and Dan Sullivan have spoken about on many an occasion, about energy for entrepreneurship and how to maintain that. So Amy, thank you for bringing that up. It's awesome.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. And by the way, those guys, why don't you guys send private messages to each other, and then I will also send you text messages when we're done here. I made a note, and because I'm getting rid of my phone literally in a couple of days. It's like autoresponder, then it's done. I got to ask Steve Sims this. Okay, so Steve Sims is the founder of the Bluefish. If you've not heard of the Bluefish, it's one of the top concierge services, all kinds of unique experiences. And so for years, Steve has coordinated, if you want to go to the moon, if you want, well, the International Space Station, because not yet. I don't think you're capable of sending anyone to the moon yet. But Steve has done all kinds of events with Elton John, Oscar parties, all kinds of crazy stuff. He knows all these celebrities, but he's not a very attractive man. And so, Steve, if you could come on, what does someone do if you're not blessed with like good looks, which he unfortunately is not? So, Steve, what would you say about all this?
I don't care where you think you're going for a year. I'm going to find you for that. I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which is why you're constantly single. And I think a lot of people really, well, I've got to give you the real answer. I have a really cool accent. And what people don't realize is I'm actually from Minneapolis, but I've worked on this accent for many, many years just to get the girls. So if you're ugly as fuck, get a cool accent.
That may be the line of the whole day right there. If you're ugly as fuck, get a cool accent.
Don't downplay that beard too. You know, it's all part of it.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, by the way, we've got a great podcast with Steve Sims called Bluefishing. And the interesting thing, like, Steve knows a ton of famous Hollywood celebrities. And behind closed doors, Steve, you can speak to the shit show that it actually is versus what is presented in the media.
Well, you summed it up best, that the worst thing about celebrities is when they actually start reading their own press and hype. And it's amazing how much depression there is behind the scenes. And they will put on a great show, and they will get depressed when they haven't got highlighted, or quite simply the mood swings I've seen when people are just about to walk down the red carpet, where certain celebrities don't want to follow another celebrity, or they want to be in front of another. It's incredible, the ego that actually comes with that fame. I wouldn't want to touch it with a barge pole. I've been pleased to see it and to watch it, but it's a dark side of the planet that I'm glad I'm not involved in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And what I like so much about what Amy's talks about is like getting people out of the fantasy, because it's real easy to look on social media. It's real easy to look outside of your own life and actually think that people, you know, have it better than you. And that sort of comparison is a terrible place to be. You can either compare yourself to what you don't have and give yourself perspective, or compare yourself to what, you know, you think it should be, and then you're going to be miserable. It's very similar to Dan Sullivan's gap conversation. So, Amy, what have I not asked you, or what have we not talked about that would make our conversation here a little incomplete if we don't bring it up? Is there anything you can think of?
Wow. I mean, I could go on for hours. You guys are so much fun.
We could. This might be a weekly thing with.
It might be. There you go.
Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, we could have our I Love Marketing Therapy Hour for everybody. You know, I think it would be extremely valuable. And there's been so many really, really good comments, and I've gotten a lot of private ones too, and I've not been able to respond to all of them, of course, but I will read them all later. So thank you guys. But yeah, I mean, there's so much. I just wanted.
I think I'll just leave off with this, right? I mean, we started off with my story of me in a bathtub contemplating suicide after my breakup. And I tried everything I could to heal. I did therapy, yoga retreats, Reiki, psychics, you name it. I tried it. And it wasn't until about 2.5 years after, you know, and the emotional intensity subsided, but I still kind of had this chip on my shoulder, and my heart was closed for business, even though I said I wanted a relationship. And I was having a conversation with a friend who I hadn't seen since a breakup, and I was catching him up on the story. And I was telling him about the betrayal and how unjust it all was. And he just stopped me and he goes, "So, Amy, does this story serve you?" And I'm like, no. He's like, "Can you tell me another time where there was kindness and there was love?" And he says, "Tell me some examples." And I was like, "Oh yeah, well, there was this time and this time." I started smiling. And it was in that moment I realized that for the last 2.5 years, I had tunnel vision of only seeing the dark, of only vilifying him and the entire situation, and really being a victim in the situation. And in that kind of tunnel vision, I couldn't see any of the positive. I couldn't, feel grateful that, I was moving across to another country and starting a whole new life, something I would have never dared do back when I was still in a relationship with this person. All these positive things were happening because of that breakup. Like I mentioned earlier, a breakup can be the shakeup you need to redirect your life. And, it was in that moment that I realized that I may not be able to change the events of my history, but I can choose to change the story I attach to those events. And I'll repeat this to you now, because we all have stories, and our stories are the programming. It's what's dictating our lives. And it's so important that whatever you're going through, whether it's a breakup or your business is hurting because of the pandemic, is that you are the author, and you're just writing your next chapter. And so I'll repeat it. You may not be able to change the events of your history, but you can choose to change the story you attach to those events. And my hope for you, my intention to you, is to, whatever it is, especially when you're going into the new year, look at your life and do an assessment. Where is there a story that's just not serving you anymore? It's kind of outlived its purpose. And maybe it's time to rewrite it.
I love that. Dean, anything you want to say? Because I
got a new screensaver for my phone here. So look, I'm looking in the chat. So Rick Benton says, "Hey, if you're ugly as fuck, get a cool accent." Then there's 3 other comments, and then, "Dean, you need the accent." So, fuck you, Rick. What are you saying?
What a great
self-esteem.
What a great way to parlay that. See, no, Amy, I think we're witnessing Dean actually being affected by he's taking it personally. Do you see that?
That's right. No, it's funny.
There's some emotion. There's some emotional wounding. Well,
Yeah, maybe I've been wounded.
So Amy, what if you could wave a magic wand? How would you want your book and your work to impact people? What's your big wish with all this?
I feel that the broken heart is like a weapon, and when you don't heal it, you just keep hurting yourself and the people that come along your path. And I look at anyone that I've had heartbreak with, or who treated my heart unkindly, and they have broken hearts. And a lot of the times it stemmed from childhood and it was just never dealt with. And so I do what I do because I want people to start having healthier relationships with themselves. And the reason, this entire book, it's not about your love story with someone else. It's about the love story you have with yourself. It always has been. And so I would love people to just have the takeaway of learning the tools of how to manage their emotions, of how to reframe their story. And there's actual tools of how you can do so. And I think it's just, creating one small degree of change, and you can actually completely shift the, where you end up. So that's my hope, is that we can just have healthier relationships.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm going to ask everyone to pull out your phones right now, and I'm going to do a social media post that I'd like you to post and share if you feel. Just record the screen. And I'm going to do a plug for Amy's book, and I'm going to just ask you guys to share it if you find it valuable. So I'll do that in approximately 5 seconds. 1. Okay, Joe Polish here, and me and Dean Jackson just got done having a conversation with Amy Chan, who wrote this book, Breakup Boot Camp. And if you're going through any struggles right now and any grief, then please buy this book and read it and share it with anyone that you know may need it. And we're going to have this episode we did on YouTube and the I Love Marketing podcast. It was really incredibly valuable. Amy Chan, Breakup Boot Camp. And Amy, why all those, let's look at that book there. So you're holding up that book, all of those, so obviously writing this has done so much to help you in your own thinking and understanding about it, which is a testament to taking a topic and going deep with it. So what's all those little Post-it notes?
So there's quotes. There's key quotes. This
Okay.
one is, do not let chaos be your measure of chemistry. Do not confuse a lack of tension with a lack of passion. So they're keynotes and key kind of wisdom nuggets that I want to be able to flip through.
Yeah. And I will say this too, you know what? The batteries don't run out on something like this. And when you're dealing with an actual physical book, there are just things in terms of, feel and that you cannot do with screens. And so I still, even though I have every type of device under the sun, and people even gift me every kind of device under the sun, I still like reading physical books. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, get a copy of her book for yourself. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang out for just a few minutes because this is the last time I'm going to, and Amy, if you're still able to stay or hang out, I'm going to do maybe 15 minutes or so, and just me and Dean can talk about whatever. And I'm just going to, say goodbye to some people because I'm going on a 1-year sabbatical, and I will pretty much be off the grid. I do want to do a shout out, which is really, there's so many good friends here that I have, and thank you guys. John Raymonds, are you still on? If you are, and you're
I am here, Joe.
Okay, I don't know if you can, if you're able to take yourself off, show yourself on video, but the reason I want to call out John is I know a lot of very well-known people that lead seminars and give talks and write books and stuff like that, and they write about success. And there are many people that are incredibly successful that they never even give a talk. And John Raymonds is an investor. He first time I think he ever gave any sort of talk is when we had a panel a couple years ago at a Genius Network annual event where I had 5 people that had all sold their companies for millions of dollars. And John sold his last company for $500 million, $500 million. Now he's an investor and he's involved in a lot of companies. And one of those is Bronze Studios. One of their movies is The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, and that was the highest grossing R-rated film in history. And John, for the first time, gave a talk on investing at the last Genius Network meeting, and it was incredible. And he's so bright. And there's a lot of people out there that they're never going to write books, and they're out there. And so when people are trying to pursue the most famous person in the world, does not necessarily mean the best advice. And there's, there's just a lot of stuff. And so, John, what are your thoughts on what you heard today with Amy?
Well, I think you'd have to go through the whole transcript to think about all the interesting words of wisdom that came out of this. I think it's an interesting thing out of the human psyche that, how do I want to say it? The natural motion is not necessarily, you would think that we would be attracted to things that would benefit us and not necessarily relate us to injuries of the past. And I just think that it's a constant struggle to understand how to relate the knowledge that we have as humans to navigate these brains that we have that don't seem to necessarily work well in the non-verbal spectrum, if that makes sense.
No, totally.
So how do you program software in your head that isn't necessarily, intuitive, in some cases doesn't have a language? And how do you go ahead and change what is software? But, I think it goes back to, what is artificial intelligence? We're talking about, real intelligence, human intelligence here too. But I think as humans, we think verbally, all of our thoughts are, articulated in some way that we run into this fallacy that everything could be explained using language when it's not true.
Right. It's funny. I'm even almost want to not say this because it sounds like it's this bad. But Gary Chapman, who wrote the 5 Love Languages, I was talking to him years ago, and he had said to me, he goes, if you want to know what someone's love language is, listen to what they complain about. And when someone's complaining, it kind of gives signs, but a lot of times a complaint can be perceived as that's very toxic. You should never complain. And a lot of times it's a cry for help. And what Amy said about pain is a messenger. I mean, I apply that to physical pain in the addiction world. I mean, these pains that show up. And then the funny thing I was going to say is, I remember I was talking to Dean Jackson. You remember you said to me, why can't shut the fuck up be a love language? And it was kind of funny. But and so he tries to apply that to me all the time. That's your love language, telling me, right? But all right, so let me go back to John for a minute. John, just because you've made a whole boatload of movies, what are the best movies that you have been involved in that you think people need to watch?
Oh man, Birth of a Nation is the one that always comes up. That's the one film where, when you're in the business, you read the script changes, you read it again, you go to set, and you spend an hour shooting, the next 2 or 3 minutes. And then when the film comes out, it's almost you don't want to see it because you've been through it so many times. At least that's my perspective. But Birth of a Nation was a film that I don't know. I could watch it again. It just has that kind of emotional impact.
Awesome.
But yeah, look, between Joker, Birth of a Nation, The Mule, there are other ones. I'd have to look at a list. Give me a minute, Joe.
Okay. And by the way, if you want to post anything in there, feel free. And so here's
I'll throw some in the chat. As best I can.
Perfect. And thank you. And by the way, so like I always say that any problem in the world can be solved with the right Genius Network. And even though I have a group called Genius Network and I have a company called Genius Network, I believe any area in your life, you can solve anything with the right Genius Network. It could be a problem or a challenge you need to deal with or an opportunity you want to reach. And so if you're going through a breakup and you need to have someone as part of your Genius Network, now you have Amy Chan, okay? And so if you want to build a website, there's things that you need. If you want to get in better physical health. So you take our buddy, Richard Rossi. I've known Richard forever. So Richard, if you want to learn the cutting edge of things that are going on in the health field, Richard, give a quick plug for what it is you recently started with your group.
Hey, Joe. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm going to miss you, big guy.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to start like a pool for all the Genius Network members, $50 a head. And we'll all guess how many days into 2021 until you resurface. And whoever gets closest gets the pool. And if you don't, and it's January 1, 2022, we'll give all the money to your favorite charity.
Well, it would be my own charity, which is Genius Recovery. So I would love for you to do that. That would be great. And if you could do it with maybe $500, that would be better. We'd have more, economically, we'd have more money, and then I'd have a bigger pool of cash waiting for me.
All right. Well, I'm going to grab joepolishpool.com immediately. So don't take it. You probably have it already anyway. Well, thanks. Yeah, I started a small mastermind called Da Vinci 50, which is completely devoted to getting folks to 120 and beyond in vibrant, good health. And the funny thing is that maybe even 5 years ago, that would not have been a very useful mastermind. But now things are progressing so quickly that it's not only possible, but it is absolutely doable if you know who to trust and if you know what to do. And what's coming online in the next 2 to 5 years is so stunning that it's hard to even believe. So the whole idea of the mastermind is, and you know me, I'm not the guru. I'm the person that tries to put the guru on the stage, and bring great minds together with genius. So my whole objective is to bring the greatest minds in the world, the scientists, the physicians, and others onto that stage and help us figure out exactly what the right moves are, because this is the kind of thing that is not going to be generally known, as almost everything, when you think about it, that's been invented isn't generally known for years after it actually is available. It's all kind of below the water surface, and then it pops up. And I don't have time to wait. I don't think a lot of us do. So to actually look back and say, oh my gosh, this was actually possible. I don't want to be the guy that said, well, it was possible, but I didn't know anything about it. So it's just bringing together this, it's like what you do, but 1/10 of the size, and aimed just solely at vibrant longevity. It's an amazing, amazing time to be alive.
Yeah, so I have you tell people if they want info where they go to get it. One of the things I will mention about Richard actually built the largest training company for the highest level students in the world. How many alumni kids have you had go through your program?
Well, it's pretty stunning. It's over 700,000. Now this is over 25 years, but it's all live events around the world. In leadership and in different fields related to what they want to be when they grow up. But the big thing is that that we did the whole thing through direct mail, which, as you know, is dead, absolutely dead, and it's still going strong. But thanks for asking, because there is an analogy, which is, I was bringing kids face to face with genius for leadership and life success. And now we're bringing these magnificent small group of adults face to face for only one thing, and that is vibrant longevity. And the other thing, Joe, is we actually managed to pull a meeting off. We were trying all year. We were blocked and blocked and blocked and blocked, and we finally pulled it off in Sundance, Utah. And the only thing the group asked at the very end was, please, 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 let's make sure that we don't mess up the chemistry, because we've all become fast friends. And as you know, as important, if not more important than who you put on the stage at Genius Network, is making sure the right people are in the room, because they create enormous value for one another, right? Hasn't that been the Genius Network experience?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, people don't just pay for who's in the room, but for who's not in the room. And so
Amen, brother.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. So Richard, if you could post how people could find out about your group, happy to give you a plug. I've known Richard for damn near 20 years. And
since you had hair.
Exactly. When I did have hair. And the thing is like a lot of the people that you'll hear me talk about, Dean Jackson will be doing sessions, and a lot of these people, as I'm making notes, will be asked to come and speak deeper. And one of the things, see, Amy doesn't even know this yet, but like I am with Nick Janicki and Lyle Maxon, I am funding the creation of a virtual reality company. We're going to use VR for fantasy contamination with addiction, and for, you know, doing things in a very conscious way, utilizing a virtual world, because there's so much of what happens with a lot of tech is they go to porn, gaming, blood sport, a lot of stuff that, you know, you could argue is not the best thing. It's not a morality talk, it's just different uses of it. So we're creating a VR company, and one day I see, you know, Amy being an avatar of Amy, talking about what do you do in a breakup if you're going through grief, and being able to role play and to have knowledge and expertise packaged and delivered into VR. And so what Genius Network is for me is, first off, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing in Genius Recovery without Genius Network, because my goal in Genius Recovery is to change the global conversation about how people view and treat addicts with compassion instead of judgment, find the best forms of treatment that have efficacy, and share that with the world. And we're going to do a lot of this not only through books and training and videos and interviews and what we're doing here, but we're also going to do that in VR. And so that's the next stage. And so I love people that are on the cutting edge of this, like Richard on the cutting edge of health, and John Raymond's. I mean, I didn't even talk to him about this, but John, like the circles he's in with machine learning and AI and sensors and networks and longevity and 3D printing and all of this stuff. I mean, he knows it, you know, he knows it inside and out. And so there's incredible people that if you just position yourself to get to know them and read what it is they do and learn about them, and, you know, that's what we try to do. So I just try to assemble unicorns, and by doing so, we can share that with the world. So, Dean, I don't know how to wrap this thing up other than I want to kind of say.
I think I can speak for everybody and say that everybody here wishes you an amazing sabbatical. I think you're going to have an amazing time. I can't wait to see how it all plays out, but I'm going to be here. We're all going to be here. We don't need to stop meeting because Joe's off on a sabbatical. I might get a word in edgewise this year. You might see what I have to say this year. So I'm looking forward to it. See what we can do here. Tim Paulson, he's a much more accommodating partner in the conversation department. So I'll get to say some things. We'll see Dean's perspective for a year here. And we'll welcome you back with open arms. I might be burned out. I might have burned out. I might have spoken all my words over the course of a year here.
Well, let me say this. So I've known Dean for 2 decades. I always say this publicly. Dean is way more brilliant at marketing than I think I could hope to be, right? Now, I'm the hustler, though. I'm the one that actually, because he's just the laziest person on the planet. So I actually go out and make shit happen and that sort of stuff. And he just pontificates and just says all the smart shit. But in truth, Dean has a brilliant marketing mind. We have helped. I mean, we've had millions of people that have downloaded our podcast. Many people are going to listen to this one. I hope you guys share it with anyone that's going through a breakup. We'll have an edited version, so it's not just me babbling all this stuff. But Dean, he's got a whole plan, and my whole team at Genius Network, like going on a sabbatical has caused me to have to set up my company. I've got the strongest team I've ever had. We've got, you know, Denise, and we've got Tarna, I'm trying to see who on my team is on right now. So let me go to the chat, and see, because we got a bunch of my team members, but let me see why is the chat not pulling up for me here? I'm not the chat, the participants. That's why it's not pulling up. I'm clicking on the wrong thing. So let's see, I'm just gonna look at and see who's on. So oh my God, it's killing me. All right, so we got Tarna, who is a marketing machine. We've got Gina, who's been with me for 17 years. She's like the Google of Genius Network and Piranha Marketing. We got Francine, who is amazing, and she actually has to see me more than probably anyone. So she helps me, just deal with all of the logistics of sending things to people. She receives more packages, and I don't know why everyone every Christmas sends me cookies and cakes, knowing that I don't eat that stuff, and then tempting me with these sort of stuff. So we got Jordan, who's a marketing machine and amazing. And who else is on the team? Giselle, who's been my amazing yoga instructor for so many years. Eunice is not on right now, and there's several other team members that aren't. But here's what I would say to people. Richard Rossi is the one that, you really helped me with this, Richard, because Richard traveled around the world with his family for a year, and I think it was 2011. He did a worldwide trip. And I had a conversation right when I decided I was going to take this sabbatical. And the reason I decided to take the sabbatical is I had a friend named Mark Schneider, who I got the term ELF from, easy, lucrative, and fun. And I was talking to him, a couple times a week, and I've known him for 20 years. Met him through Joe Sugarman, the guy that created Blue Blocker sunglasses, brilliant marketer. And we were playing golf one day, and he had mentioned ELF. And I've played golf maybe 8 times in my entire life. I think it's a waste of real estate, but a lot of people love golf, and Dean Jackson loves golf. And he said ELF, easy, lucrative, and fun. And basically I said, you know what? I love that. I'm going to develop into something. So I created ELF Marketing. I trademarked it. We have a whole book, which the Average Joe's Marketing book, which has only been shared with Genius Network members. It's all about ELF versus half. And so Mark was brilliant. Mark was worth about $300 million, I estimate. And I get a call about a little over 4 months ago from a message from his son that's sent me a message asking if I was on WhatsApp. And I said, yeah. And he's like, can I call you? And so he called me, and he let me know that they had found Mark, my friend, and his father in his dead that morning in his bed at 59 years old. And something triggered in my mind that, wow, I don't think work is working for a lot of people. I've pointed this out, but my friend Kathy Colby, I have of all these Gaping Void images, gapingvoid.com, by the way, that's where we get this stuff. And I think Jason Corman is actually on this. He's the CEO of Gaping Void. One of them says, I'm going to grab it. Hang with me here. It says, the time to quit working is when working is no longer working. And I would always use this analogy of, if you're reading a book, it's late at night, or you're reading something online, and you've just read a page, and then you realize you can't comprehend what you just read, and then you try to read it again because you're so exhausted, you're so fried. And what happens with workaholism, what happens with work, is we can get so caught up that it's just not working. I could make this analogy to what Amy talked about today. And when I heard that Mark had passed away, I was like, man, I need to go think about what the hell's going on in the world, because I'm in a position where I talk to people that are struggling with addiction and everything. And that's why I made the decision. It just came to me. I want to take a 1-year sabbatical. I'm going to take a year, and I don't think I needed a year. I think I need like 6 months, but I decided to give myself a year just in case, just to give me that buffer. And so I started having conversations. I did a conversation with David Bach. I had a conversation with Dan Babs, and I had a conversation with Richard Rossi. And Richard said, you know what? I wouldn't plan any of it until you started. And so I was like, you know what? That takes a lot of pressure off, because everyone's asking, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And I say to people, I don't know. I haven't planned it, because I haven't. And secondly, I don't need to go anywhere. It's like from this video, it was about breathing. This guy said at the end of it, some doors you can only open them up from the inside. So to me, this is an inside journey, not an external journey. Will I go places? Will I change my environment? Yes. But it's not like I need to go anywhere. Where I need to go is I need to go inward. And I had a really tough, and you can hear about, if you care, joesabbatical.com. There's a short letter there. I may expand it. And I put a couple of videos. The first interview I did with Dan and Babs about why I decided to do the sabbatical. And then I did over a 2-hour interview where Ben Hardy who wrote Personality Isn't Permanent, Willpower Doesn't Work, and his latest book, Who Not How, with Dan Sullivan. He interviewed me because he wants to write an article about sabbaticals. But what's happened is, since I announced this, I think a lot of people are like, you're the last guy that I would ever think would do a sabbatical for like a year, including me. But I'm going to do it. And I made a commitment to myself that even if someone offered me $100 million to not take the sabbatical, I wouldn't take the money. Would it be hard if anyone showed up and said, well, yeah, it'd be hard as hell. It's a lot of money. But I made a commitment. I'm doing this. There's no yes or no. And so I made that decision to do that. And what I'm hoping is that, my life I have this sign on the wall that says, be willing to destroy anything in your life that's not excellent. And I have a lot of excellent things in my life. I have a lot of excellent relationships, but I have a lot that are not. And so, the best way that I know how to do it is to give myself space. Because as I've said with Dan Sullivan many times, I heard it from Dan, we did a podcast on it, is entrepreneurs that are too tightly scheduled cannot transform themselves. And even my friend Annie Lala, who's a love coach, she says with some entrepreneurs, when you're single, you're not dockable. And if you want to get into a relationship, you have to be dockable. You can't just take your ocean liner or your boat and you pull up to the shore and then get out. You have to dock it. And what happens is as entrepreneurs, we can bury ourselves in work or activity, and we're not available. And I found that with myself, especially when I was betrayed, especially when I had a breakup, I closed myself off. And I'm the connection guy, right? And I'm still connected in a lot of ways, but I got disconnected in a lot of ways. And so part of my sabbatical, what I've learned is there's many ways to do a sabbatical. There's not like, here's how you do it. And it's my own life. I'm going to do whatever is expanding for me and not contracting. But by announcing it, I have gotten hundreds of messages, comments, letters since I announced it, where people are saying, this has inspired me. I'm going to do this. And it made me realize that the driven people of the world, man, they just beat themselves up a lot. And I'm hoping that I don't have any goal like I got to write a book about this, or I have to create something that comes out of it. If I feel the need to do that, I will, but I'm not going into it for that reason. I'm going into it for rejuvenation. And what David Bach said in the video, which I recommend you watch, we posted it on joesabbatical.com. He said, he talks about he did a year sabbatical, but he talks about how to do a 6 week sabbatical. And he says, I didn't recharge my batteries, I replaced them. And so I'm going to literally replace my batteries. And, and I'm hoping that wherever you're at in your life, there's some area that's not excellent. And it may be, literally the reason I wanted to end the year, and we fit in this meeting with Amy. My team, I've got to give my team credit. They had 2 freaking days to just promote this as best we could. If they would have had a week, we would have had 3 times as many people on it. But they did a really wonderful job because my team is awesome. And when I said I'm going to go on sabbatical, it's amazing because they're like, let's get this asshole out of here so we can get some real work done. And it was so hard for me to ever let go. So this is a real process of letting go. It's going to be a bit of an identity death, but I hope that in whatever way, whatever I'm saying right now can encourage you to, how do you solve one problem that solves 100 problems? How do you solve one problem that solves 50 problems? And there's some problems in my life that I've not been able to figure out how to solve at the level of thinking that created them, using the Einstein quote, the same level of thinking that created the problem is not the same level of thinking needed to solve it. So I'm going to go off and I'm going to immerse myself in music, in art, in recovery work, and health, because one of my favorite proverbs, he or she who has their health has 1,000 dreams. He or she who does not have their health has only one. So there is nothing more important than taking care of your mental and physical health. And so we've got a whole team of people that are going to continue to provide awesome stuff. Genius Network. We've got an incredible faculty. It's going to be run by the members. We've got many Genius Network members that are on here right now. And the shit that we've got lined up for you guys is so good. So I appreciate everyone that's part of Genius Network. All of you that, if you're here for the first time, welcome. We've got so much good stuff on I Love Marketing. Subscribe to I Love Marketing. If you have anyone that needs help with Genius Recovery, with recovery, just go to geniusrecovery.com. It's all free. We don't sell anything there. And then my book, Life Gives to the Giver. If you've not read it, go to joesfreebook.com. And Dean Jackson is going to teach people this year how to basically put information in front of somebody in order to help them. So today, Breakup Boot Camp, you have an issue in your life. Let's put this information in front of you in the form of a conversation and interview. Let's also put more information in front of you in the form of a book. And you can go as deep with this as you want, but all of you have expertise and you all have skills. So not only do we want to bring useful content to you, content is valuable, but context is infinitely more valuable. So we want to provide things that help build a better entrepreneur. And so, yeah, on behalf of myself and everyone, thank you guys for listening to me babble and for all the wonderful, kind messages and kind words. And you are going to be in incredible hands with my team and Dean Jackson moving forward. Stay on the list. Make sure you subscribe to everything that we have, and we will notify you every time we're doing a live meeting. Tim Polson will always show up. I've worked with Tim. Anything else you want to say? We've been working together for 20 years now. And you...
Yeah, I want to say we're going to miss you, Joe. I'm looking at the chat, man. You are a beloved fellow. So thank you. And we're just all delighted. We love you, Joe. We love you, man. Your team loves you.
I know. Thank you. I love you. Love you guys.
The team puts up with
Yeah, we love you, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. Who said that? I couldn't see who that was.
It's Peter Carmichael from calling from Belgium, Europe. We met in Los Angeles with Evan, and Jamie was there, and then in Calgary.
So awesome. Thank you, Peter, man. Great to see you. Thank you. From Belgium.
Thank you very much. You're awesome. We love you.
Love you. Thank you. Yeah, so that's it, everyone. And and Jeff Madoff, can people attend any of your classes that you're doing at the new school, or is that closed?
Please don't call on Jeff Madoff. He is so boring.
Yeah, no, you are right, but he does occasionally get smart people around him. So just not for his sake, but for the sake of everyone here.
That's why I show up here, because then there's smart people around me.
Jeff is a director and a producer, incredibly talented guy. He wrote Creative Careers, how to make a living with your ideas. Almost everything that you've seen on television and commercials from Victoria's Secret over the last 20 years, Jeff has produced and directed. So he has an annoying job. He has to hang around models all the time. But Jeff, like you do these great, interviews and speakers that come because you teach a class at New School in New York, but it's now virtual. So how do people find out about that?
I am taking a sabbatical from teaching for spring back in the summer. And the reason is because I'm putting together all the great interviews, of which you were interviewed, Dan Sullivan was interviewed, a lot of terrific people, and going to finally be starting a podcast.
Good.
And you are one of the many people that's been encouraging me to do that. And I have so much great content, and this was the time to do it. So I was inspired by your changing direction. And so I'm going to be doing that, but I'll be teaching again in the summer and the fall. And then, yes, people, as some of your members did, come to my class.
Yeah. Yep.
So I will keep them apprised, and hopefully I'll be seeing a lot of them during this year too.
And
So-
Jeff, you're actually going to be doing some interviews and curating some stuff in Genius Network with Genius Network members. So people that are part of that will see that, which will be awesome.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that maybe I've known you the longest of anybody on the call. We go back to like 1995 or 6, something like that. And so I knew Joe when he not only had a ponytail, and it was his own, it wasn't a pony's, and was a carpet cleaner. And one of the many character flaws that Joe and I share is that we like people who we play well with. And when I met Joe on his very first trip to New York, thanks to Ken Glickman, a dear mutual friend of both of us, and Joe and I have been friends since that time. And it's been a fantastic, fantastic friendship that has continued to grow, which shows you how small it was when it started, that it's continued to grow. But it has continued to grow over the last 25 years in depth and value and, all of that. Yeah. And I'm very grateful for that, because Joe's Joe's real magic is how he puts people together, and not just groups, but also individuals. And, you know, he is, aside from other kinds of master, he's also a master connector. And, but he does it from a basis of you're going to like this person, not what they can do for you.
Yeah.
So I've never met anybody that can do anything for me in this group, but I have met some people that I've become wonderful friends with because they're just terrific people. And that's what you attract. So thank you. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So yeah, so that's it, everyone. I appreciate you and those of you that are still on, taking the time to be on here. I hope you found it really valuable. And I wish you all the very best. I know it's been one hell of a year, and I know we got some craziness in front of us, but take care of yourselves because you are ultimately the $1 million racehorse, and you're in good hands with an incredible team. So I will see you all next, well, not next year, but the year after in 2022. And thank you. Just have a happy new year.
Merci, Joe.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Joe. Thank you.
Healthy sabbatical.
Yay. Thank you,
God-
Joe.
Dios te bendiga,
God bless,
Joe.
Joe.
Bye, Joe. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Happy sabbatical, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank
Well.
you.
Joe, for everything.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Joe.
Travel well. Yeah, thank you so much, Joe, for everything.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Thank
you.
you.
Much love.
Inside
Good luck.
dear.
Good luck with your year.
Travel well.
Super sabbatical.
Gonna miss you.
Wow.
Come back.
Magic carpet of
Happy New
love.
Year.
Yeah, right in there.
Que Dios te bendiga, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That was so awesome.
Love you, Joe. Be safe.
Thank you, Joe.
I almost feel like it's an encore. I just have to go out. Thank you. Love you guys. Really, really appreciate it.
Merci, Joe.
Glad you love it.
Absolutely awesome.
Thank you,
Right you
Joe.
are.
Joe.
It's important.
Pleasure. Have fun. Be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
All right. Stop.